Yo, y'all ready for this? Yeah.
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and welcome back to the BBcom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Crouchelli. Anthony is the founder of More Than Miles. He's the VP of Talent and Content at Light Sport, partner of Rebel Union and Alpha Fit Club, and a founding trainer at Grit Boxing. Soccer player turned top fitness expert, Anthony has transformed the traditional workout into a holistic transformation of mental and physical growth, dubbing his motto as one rep at a time and ultimately creating the one method. Previously working at top fitness studios such as Rumble, Barry's Bootcamp, Performance House, and more, Anthony is now transforming failing gym franchises into some of the nation's top performance studios with his consulting business, Gym Rescue. He has 10 plus years of boxing experience and has various certifications inside the fitness space, including CFSC, USA Boxing, and NCSF. He's been featured in USA Today, The View, GMA, NBC, People Magazine, Shape Magazine, and Reader's Digest. Anthony, welcome to the BBcom podcast.
Thanks for having me. A little 5-paragraph intro. We love that.
We're not, surprisingly, it's a brief one. So thanks for keeping it short and sweet on us today.
I got you.
Guys, today we're going to jump into, no surprise, learning a bit about our guests. So we are talking about topic one, building Anthony. So start out by telling us how you got here. What's your background in health and fitness? Tell us about the journey that brought you here today, professionally, personally, and beyond.
Yeah. So the fitness journey started kind of as a kid playing soccer competitively. Started in my local hometown and then moved into club ball, playing academy ball, and then from academy ball into college. And I think once I kind of saw the cusp of my college career coming to an end, I feel like all the athletes out there, you kind of know when you know. I was like, oh, what do I do post-grad? And that was the biggest thing that I was struggling with because I didn't know what that exit was going to be. And you know how it is. If you're an athlete, you exit college and you're like, well, what else do I have to offer? So moved to the city. Like every single fitness person, I worked at Equinox, which I think everybody normally does way back in the day. And I started my career as a trainer, but then I would sub a class there called Ab Lab. And I think it's now called like Best Abs Ever or whatever it is. But I did that for like 3 months. And then I had a friend who worked at Barry's who was like, hey, you should come work at Barry's. And I was like, I don't know anything about group fitness, but let me go try this. Fell in love with the culture at Barry's. I think what I loved about it there was it was super accepting and welcoming, but also right in my energy source of like fun, engaging group fitness. So I departed Equinox and took on this challenge at Barry's, or this next step at Barry's per se. And then I think it was like 4 months later, Rumble was opening. I met with somebody there and they were like, hey, we're opening this gym. You've got great energy and you box. Would you be interested in potentially coming onto the team? We're looking to add like 2 more trainers to kind of this like founding, after the founding 5, this kind of like next wave of people. And I was like, yeah, sure. So that was madness. If you know the Rumble OG days from like 2015, you got like Justin Bieber coming in and Jason Derulo and David Beckham and young Anthony. I'm from a small town in Jersey, so I'd post on my Facebook and people would lose it. They'd be like, I have a photo with like David Beckham and his kid, and people would be like, who are you? What are you doing? And I took a moment for those, like, I would say that 3-year gap there where I was meeting so many individuals because so many celebrities were coming through that door that I was like, this is craziness. And then I took a moment to reset because I kind of burned out from the group fitness space. I actually worked at WeWork, at Rise by WeWork for a little while. I was working on more of their consulting of their group fitness opportunities they had there. So they had a bunch of different studios and I would kind of go in, teach, take, and then kind of review and see like, how can we build out these class models to be a little stronger so that the people upstairs weren't going to Seoul or Barry's or other studios. They could just kind of stay in the building and use that Rise by WeWork space. And then I met a great guy named there, Kurt Ellis. Kurt Ellis, shout out. If you guys know Kurt Ellis, he's a rock star. And he was at Performance House. And he was like, hey, man, I think you would do great here. You have a good following. You have a lot of clients. You might want to explore looking to go into that space. So I met with Eric and Matt and Devin back in that day, popped in there. And then, of course, I feel like it just happens in these stages. Like the next year, like Grit came around. And they were like, hey, you have all this experience. We're building a gym. And then pandemic hit. I feel like I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but pandemic hit. And then from there, I kind of built out my connections. And that's where I was able to work with other brands like Aquabag, got in with Light Sport, and then got in with Alpha Fit Club. And because I had this background and experience, that kind of led me to a place where I could consult and then invest and then grow with those brands.
I feel like every story starts at Equinox.
Everyone.
Within this city specifically.
Every single
I've
one.
been there. You've been there.
Yep.
Multiple of our guests have
Yep.
been there. It seems like the starting line of the
Yeah.
New York City fitness scene. And it's cool to see. You've essentially been a part of every major, let's call it boutique, fitness class, gym, franchise, et cetera, in
Yeah.
New York City. Do you think that there was a synergy between all of them, and what kept drawing you from one to the other that you were really excited about being a part of?
Yeah, community. I think I would walk in and take class and see how connected people were from the start. And I'm an empath, so I was like, oh, I resonate with these people right away. I think what always struck me as a kid, I kind of noted this to you before the podcast, that, I was one of the first people in my family to graduate college. So I come from a very empath, we're all family, we want to grind, we want to grow, but I also come from a place of wanting to learn. And I think that's what kind of got me from studio to studio, was there was a new spark. There was this new kind of creative twist on fitness that I was like, oh, I can learn something new from each of these different studios. And that's where I kind of got to, where I was exploring these, studio over studio.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a blue-collar background as well, and just kind of being able to get your hands dirty and the want of getting your hands dirty. If it's a founding trainer, that sounds glamorous, but that's typically difficult no matter what brand your, founding trainer is. Nice in theory, but usually means you're creating something from the ground up. So do you think there's correlation to your personal background and to the willingness to have that in your professional life? Yeah,
I think even at Light Sport, I give them the biggest credit. I've been with them for about 4 years, and I'm like a cowboy there. And that's what I love about being a founding trainer or being a part of those starting from the ground, is that you have this energy to win because you have this underdog mentality the whole time. And I think the synergy is there because every single time I walked into a space outside of Barry's, I had that kind of I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. And that's the little spark that lets that small impact have intentions behind it.
I love that. What's been the why behind movement becoming the epicenter of your life and now career?
Well, I think I found a lot of clarity through movement. I think, like we noted before with soccer and stuff, and when that came to a close, I kind of lived in that, I don't know what to do next. I think I come from a home that is a little more, I would say, stoic from time to time with emotions and feelings and so forth. So I think movement was that ability to find release. So I think that's why it became my why, because I'd be able to vocalize about it, and then I would see somebody in class do it, and I'd be like, oh, you're putting in the same effort in this class into your relationships and your friendships and your family. And I was like, this is the science, is that if you put the same effort that you're putting into punching a bag into your relationships, you're going to find progress.
That's great. I feel like you've now been the athlete. You've helped people become more athletic in multiple modalities across New York City and beyond, especially with the digital explosion that occurred during 2020 and beyond. You were able to reach so many more people during that time. How did you instill and inject community during that time frame specifically? I feel like we all, and I was in the health and wellness event business during that time as well. It kind of turned us all on our heads a little bit and made us think differently. So how did you deem yourself as successful in terms of building community through a screen and through a digital platform?
This story is kind of crazy, so I will try and keep it as short as I can, but it was wild. The day that the world shut down, the next day I went on Instagram Live, and there was 10,000 people on an IG Live workout. And I was like, I've never seen numbers like this.
Yeah, it's usually 82 on a good
50,
day.
50 on a good day. This is pre-IG Live being anything. So everybody was home, and I did this hour-long workout on Instagram. And everybody was like, oh my God, do this tomorrow. That day, I hit up 7 people who taught different modalities. I was like, here's my Instagram login. And they taught different classes that were 30 minutes each. So there was a dance class, a Pilates class, a yoga class, a strength class, a boxing class, everything. And I ran that for 3 months. And that's what grew my social out, was I just gave people options all in one place. And then from there, we kind of were like, do we want to do this on a platform and so forth? But then also at that point, it was music copywriting was they were getting strict on that. Things were gently starting to open, so you could do distance-based workouts with masks on and stuff. So I rode that first wave hard. Of like the first 3 months during the lockdown, I was running probably 8 classes a day on IG Live that then moved to Zoom, and then from Zoom to in-person. And then obviously with Lightboxer and Lightsport, I started moving into that space where they had hardware, and that was where the audience could go to as well. But that space was, I mean, you probably know this. You would like go on Instagram. There's like 20 people doing an Instagram Live. It was wild.
Yeah, no, it was a wild time for sure. And I feel like we've talked about this on the podcast before as well with previous guests, we're now entering this era where it's awesome to see that stone that was flipped over during the time period and help people connect and move their bodies and get healthier through the digital formats that exist today. At the same time, we're now on this aggressive other side of the spectrum where people want to connect in real life again. And this has been a huge part of our dialogue. It's part of our strategy going to 2025 as a brand as well, getting people together in real life. How are you doing that in your career and bringing people together? How are you doing it in the brands that you work with? Tell us a little bit about that.
So More Than Miles has been the easiest part of it. So I started this race collective is what I like to call it, because we don't want to be just another track club or another run club. We say that we're a race collective. So what we do is we have these unsanctioned races that go on throughout the year, and we use the funds that we raise from that to allow people who can't afford the ability to race. People show up just for that because they're like, I just want to support somebody who might need it. We have a race tonight, funny enough. But through these races, people have kind of been flooding out because they want to meet people, they want to connect with people. It's not necessarily like you have to sign up for a 5K, a 10K, or a marathon. We have races that are run the hill, right? So you run directly up a hill, and then we grab a beer or a non-alcoholic beer after, whatever people prefer. And that amount of socialing, I think, is great for people. Community runs that are not super heavy at a super fast pace. I'll have walkers and runners who come out. And then group fitness classes. Like, I've been back in that space. I think what the digital space has done in a great way is provided options, right? Our client at Lightsport is Jack in the back who has 3 kids, right? Works a long day. He's about to go out the door to go get his workout in, and then he's got to cook dinner, or he's got to help his partner out, or whatever it might be. So can they pick up and do something at home that gives them some kind of accountability, data, and so forth, that they have that option?
You are now transforming gym franchises into studios. I feel like it could be seen as a level up. I'm sure it's seen as a level up, but it's also a whole nother layer of work added to the
whole
mix.
Different, yeah.
So tell us more about that, how it started, what fuels the success, and more about the type of spaces that you're building.
Yeah, so Gym Rescue started with my business partner, Aaron, in Montreal with Rebel Union, Aaron and Alyssa. They are the absolute best humans I know. And I met Aaron through Aquabag. So when the world kind of shut down, Aquabag was planning on going into this digital space. So what I would do is people would be like, I want a box at home. And I would be like, cool, I'm going to essentially partner with Aquabag. You can buy an Aquabag with a sensor in it, and you can track your punches. And it was this really cool format that we built with them. The technology never kind of took off to the masses, but I did meet Aaron through that. And what I started doing with Aaron on a small scale was consult. He'd be like, hey man, I have no music. I need music to, like, when he comes to New York, he's like, this is the greatest fitness experience I get to have. And then he goes to Montreal and he's like, it's almost there, but I need something help-wise. So I consulted for a while, and then I was like, why don't we just partner up on this? Like, why don't I come in and start doing fractional work and see if I can use my knowledge of musicality in the room to training trainers, but then also, like, how do we retain members on different membership packages? The big thing they were doing in Montreal was they had packs. They were selling 5 packs and 10 packs. Can we bundle a membership that gives people enough that they feel like they're getting a true value? So I started with Rebel Union, and we've been now working together for almost 2.5 years, and that's been great. They have been skyrocketing in Montreal. They've added a strength studio. There have been talks about expanding from there into another brick and mortar. And then I kind of crossed out of that into consulting for different franchises that were opening up through something like an exponential, right? So somebody would be like, hey, you worked at that gym back in the day. We have one in the suburbs. Can you come in and Anthony-fy the trainers? Or can you come in and just give us perspective on what is a client success journey from the first 30 days to 90 days? And how are you tracking their progress? How many classes are they taking per week? How are you following up? How are you hitting their touch points? And then with Alpha, that was me coming in as a franchise owner. And that's when I learned build out costs, LOIs, I learned HVACs, which are a beast inside of itself, but I learned all the nitty gritty side that I didn't get from before, which is front facing, right? It's talent, it's music, it's membership. Now I'm doing the other side where it's like build out, labor costs, overhead, P&L, all that kind of stuff. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity, I'll say in the last year, to really get a full perspective, because next year, that's going to be a little more of the push, is really leaning into that space of, hey, if your gym is going through a tough time, let's create a roadmap for it. It's not me coming in and like John Taffering it. It could be, but I think more the goal is a lot of people have the dream and the vision. They're just too busy. And what I can do is kind of offload those hours and concentrate them so you can find success.
So essentially partnering with the owners, the managers, the team that exists there, not only on customer engagement, though it seems like that's, or member engagement rather, seems like that's the course in which it started, to full on reimagining what the space can look like, feel like, right? Because I think we've already been in this era for the last couple of years as people have returned to gyms and whatnot. They are looking for a very uniquely different type of experience as of in comparison to what we saw years prior. So the classic big box gyms, they're dying in a way, right? And we are seeing the rise of boutique fitness and one-off locations that maybe have the potential to franchise, but maybe also that's not their goal.
Yes.
I'll give a shout out to Aneva in Long Island City, which is our home.
Love them. They're great.
Fantastic. They're our home gym
Gorgeous
for where
gym.
we're shooting with our founding trainers right now. And it was just, there was thought and love put into the build out of that gym, and the way they continue to run that is the community first mindset. So I think the big players in the games, I won't call anybody out on the podcast, but the big players are starting to realize, what they are missing in comparative to some of these one-off gyms.
And you know this too. Once you sell to the masses, right? You sell your company, then they can franchise it out. It loses the value, right? And I mean that respectfully, but it loses the value because, not saying the name of it, but like 10 years ago, right? It was a creme de la creme. And then when they sell and then there's hundreds of them, they lose that little spark of what they had. And then I think what happens more or less is you've got these privately owned gyms that are franchising out, but they're still private. So they still hold the core values and they still kind of maintain this brand presence throughout. So there's never that like things slip through the cracks. I think what they're doing in Long Island City that's really great is that you could tell they put a lot of TLC into it, but every single time I go on their page and they're doing events, everybody's engaged, from the wellness side of it to the strength side of it to the conditioning side of it. That gym is packed in a great way.
Yeah. I totally agree. I hope we continue to see more of it.
Yeah.
I think that's really where the masses are starting to flock to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about modality flexibility. So you yourself, going into topic 2, Anthony, you yourself have explored and continue to explore a variety of modalities. So boxing, running, soccer, consistent strength training throughout all of those. How do you feel you benefit from a classic cross-training regimen and versus going all in on one specific movement?
Well, it's a funny question because right now I'm doing it, right? Like for everybody watching, I just ran the Berlin Marathon. I run New York City in 3 weeks, and then I do High Rock Chicago right after that. So you think about it though, it's like very different. It's similar, but it's different training. I'm struggling right now because I'm running so much that my strength, I feel like, has taken a back seat. Even though I'm prioritizing unilateral work, it's still at that point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be strong enough for this High Rocks competition that's come up. I know conditioning wise, I'll fly. But strength wise, you got to push that sled. You got to have that posterior chain to pull that weight as well. I think cross training has been super beneficial. I came from, when I was in that boxing lane, that's all I was doing. I was boxing 4 or 5 days a week. And I think there's pros and cons of it, right? When you're in it so dialed in, you fall in love with the sport because it's all you know and that's all you're doing. But at the same time, I'd go to lift a weight in class and be like, that doesn't move the same way as it used to. I think we talked about marathon training as well, right? I started my marathon training probably like 15 weeks ago for Berlin is when my first wave went out. And I've lost 18 pounds in 15 weeks. And I'm eating everything in sight. So I think cross training is super beneficial. I think where I'm finding the hardship right now is you want to pour everything into this one modality because you want to find success in it. And it's really about being smart with how you attack that, because if you're not, you're going to put so much load on your joints, and then in return, you're going to do more harm than good.
Yeah, and that really is the fast follow question here. How can something like a well-rounded routine really lower the risk of injury? We say it so often here. There is no such thing as 100% injury prevention, but we can certainly lower the risk
Yeah.
of obtaining those injuries. So, how do you say, when you're training for your marathons or you're training for a high rocks or whatever event that you have on the schedule, because we do preach here, it's important to have something on that schedule
Yeah.
to work towards. But how do you work towards that while keeping cross training in mind and, keeping your prehab routine alive?
Stretch, sleep, recover. I used to
It's
not
that
even,
simple.
It is and it isn't. I mean, I'm the prime example, right? I work a 9 to 5 and then I scoot out to all the different gyms that I have to fill in the gaps. So I have a 9 to 5 and then a 5 to 9. What I found really successful was I do these 15-minute routines in the morning where I just get on my foam roller, just gently get my, body moving. I'll do a little bit of trigger point stuff with a lacrosse ball, and then I just actively stretch throughout the day until night. I will tell you this, my body has never felt better since I started stretching and prioritizing stretching. So I think leaning into, as you're going through these moments of how do you improve your body, how do you feel strong, how do you continue to grow, if you prioritize the recovery side as well, the possibilities are endless. Because you know this as well. I used to be 22 years old, Anthony, in the city. I was trying to be in the 1,000-pound club. I looked like this. I looked crazy. And I think at 33 years old I am now, I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life.
I agree. I'm with you. I think there's a maturity that comes into play when it just starts to click mentally and you start to just take a step back to understand what makes you feel your best.
Yeah.
Like right today, Epsom salt baths are really helpful for me. They just draw out toxins. They help my muscles feel really good.
Yeah.
Sauna is huge for me, and sauna and cold plunge. I know it sounds cliche, but these small things on a consistent basis add up. Stretching, same thing. Like throw TV on at night. I sit on my floor with my cat and my dog, and we're catching up and playing fetch, but in the middle I'm doing just like some yin yang type of flows and just like holding them for 2-3 minutes, just stretching out the fascia that really hasn't gotten that love. So all of these things are just a kind of a culmination of definitely learning lessons, let's say over the last 10 or so years. I've had the fractures, I've had the overuse injuries, we all have. So I think with each of those, hopefully you don't have to go through an injury to learn the lesson.
No.
And you can kind of just understand that your body needs rest, your body needs physical care.
Yep.
Sometimes you need a hands-on body massage just to get into some of those places, and then sleep is huge. How do you balance sleep with such a crazy schedule and having your hands in so many things?
You schedule it, right? Like my whole day is Google meetings. Like I schedule my lunch breaks, everything inside of that. So I think I hyper prioritize sleep because if I didn't, I wouldn't know what to do. My also thing is like, this, like I work in talent development, but I also do a lot of production stuff. So sometimes I'm editing late at night and I know that I have to log off at a certain time because if I don't, that can go into the wee hours of the night. To circle back really quick though, with recovery, I think one thing to note is the accessibility to recovery. That's something that's not talked about a lot. I ran with a lot of people in Berlin and I talked about my journey. They were like, I saw you going to get dry needling and massaging and stuff like that. Like that looks super expensive. And I had to take a moment and be like, yeah, like that is an investment inside of itself. So I think what I would love to see more of is either educating people on making recovery accessible or finding alternate options, right? Like if you can't afford a place, I'm making this up, but like the cold plunge lounge or the sauna lounge, how do you find that at home? You talked about Epsom salt baths, right? So like giving people alternatives, I think is something huge that hopefully can happen down the line, is like making recovery accessible for all.
I totally agree. Something that we're actually debuting in our new fitness app that's coming out later this year / early next year. We'll have a whole accessories tab, a whole accessories library, or snacks as we call them.
Yeah.
And they'll essentially be pre or post accessories that you can do just for that purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, some of our coaches are going to be walking you through foam roller just for your thoracic spine or upper body, taking you through foam roller lower body sessions, taking you through, a tech neck, series where if you were on your computer all day, what is something that I can do, to loosen up my cervical spine, to get my shoulders out of that rounded position, to loosen up those wrists so that we don't have carpal tunnel at 30 something years old.
Yeah.
But we purposely and strategically injected this into the app with a specific emphasis on people just taking the 10 to 15 minutes, even if it's not before. By the way, these don't have to be before or after your workout. This could be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon 100%. When you have an hour in between calls or you're on the go, etc. You just drove for a while, whatever the case may be, but just holding people accountable and helping show how truly seamless it can be by just taking 10 minutes and giving your body some love.
Yeah, I think it's funny you talked about the word snacks. I got to give him a small shout out if I can. I think what Joe Holder did with exercise snacks and what he did just in the community of allowing people to get information at an accessible point or provide assets and these like, you know, kitchens and stuff that he does and these like shops that he puts up with the I think it's like the vegan kitchen or vegan whatever he does this incredible thing where he pops up into different pantries and essentially puts, you know, fresh food for people who might not be able to afford it. And that's what I talk about accessibility in this industry a lot is I think I didn't even realize it until I started running outside of this country of like, wow, a lot of these things that we are doing are not accessible to a lot of people. So I'm excited to hear that you guys are doing that because you're going to provide a lot of information and give people a lot of accessories that they can use to, you know, improve their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're excited to have you involved in the future as well and going into 2025. And I couldn't agree more. We're not going to go down the healthcare conversation here because we only have a limited time in the studio here, ladies and gentlemen. But fitness should be accessible. Just plain flat. Fitness should be accessible. We're on a mission to do just that. You know, you don't need a $300 gym membership every month to just gain the basic necessities of how to take care of your body and how to live a longer and healthier life.
100%.
I want to talk about More Than Miles.
Yeah.
I feel like this is your baby right now,
It
rightfully so. So it was definitely deemed worthy of having its own topic today. So you are the founder of More Than Miles. Break down how the idea came to fruition, what the mission behind it is. Just give us some context of what this is.
Yeah. So my co-founder, Alfonso Spoli, we met in October of last year. He works for On. He's an incredible human. He was going through a really tough spot in his life. I was going through a really tough spot in my life, and he, funny enough, for a while could not run because he was going through a medical condition that was limiting him movement-wise of what he could do. So he was dealing with all this pent-up energy through a really rough time. I was kind of working in a parallel at the same time of not being able to do something, and when we were able to be cleared to run, we went on our first run and we exhaled and we said, wow, that felt good. We got everything we needed to get off our chest. And we did that by just going on a jog and having conversation and kind of like naturally venting. And then our other two co-founders, Mike Riley and Mohammed Bader, came with us on this run. And we kind of all started clicking. And we all come from different backgrounds, right? Very diverse founding group. But I think the conversations that just started happening from it, I was like, oh, there's something here. And we started just running. And it wasn't for time. It was just like, hey, let's just like run and have a conversation. Started with 4 people, then 10, then 15, then 20, and 30 and 40, and now sometimes 50, 60 people. But what we do is every quarter mile on our community runs, you switch where you are on the run. So you have to meet somebody new and have a conversation with somebody who you might know or not know. And it kind of forces you in a great way to be in a place where it's not that deep, but just be able to find clarity through movement. And it's been this really great thing because like we talked about before, it's like we are the No Time Run Club or the No Time Movement Collective. Like we could care less about time. We care that people are not sitting at home and they're moving their body. Like the demographic for anybody out there who might be listening to this is like, if you're a couch to 5K person or you've run 10 marathons, it doesn't matter. There's a place for you at More Than Miles because we just want people to be people through movement.
I feel like we need t-shirts that say No Time Run Club.
No Time Run Club.
I want to be the first one that gets that t-shirt.
Get it out. Let's go.
So you now hold events, regular events for this. Where are you holding them? How many people are coming to them? How did this grow over time?
On a run,
You're like, I blacked out.
I literally was like, I have no idea how this happened. We, in Hoboken, we ran on one of our community runs. We passed the hill at Stevens College, and I was like, imagine we sprinted up this hill today. So we did. Got to the top and I was like, whew, I'm exhausted. And Alphonse was like, okay, do it again. And I was like, all right. So we started doing it. And we were like, there's something here. And then our friend Mike, if you ever see Mike Riley, he's like this tall, very buff man who's like Nick Bear 2.0. Shout out Mike. He ran it and it was like, oh, I got to get some buddies. We got to compete. And I was like, okay. So we started doing this with our internal group, which was just more of our community. And then kids from Stevens College would like hop the fence and be like, hey man, can I run? And we're like, yeah, sure. And then it started becoming this thing where people would show up. And then from there, brands wanted to get involved. And we really, I say this all the time at More Than Miles, we are not like a brand focused run club. We do these events, and like, if you want to pop up and have some cool stuff there, great. Like at the end of the day, the whole mission is always anything that comes in, we kind of put into the small fund to be able to allow people who can't afford to run the ability to run. So the races kind of took off this year because Run the Hill did well. And then me as a creative, I was like, great, I want to do this midnight mile where it's like your fastest mile in Hoboken. This will come out on October 27th, but we're doing a race called Pin to Pin, which I think will be the most unique race we do. It's 20 people, 5 teams of 4. Each person is driven to an undisclosed location. They're given an envelope that has a pin, and they have to run 2 miles to their teammate. Everybody is running to different pins, and they all finish at the same pin. So it's this really cool kind of like capture the flag, obstacle course kind of setup. But that's where we started thinking differently outside the box of like, we are this like unsanctioned movement collective, and that's where the races came from.
Yeah, gamifying
Yes.
running. I mean, it's like schoolyard recess again, right?
Exactly.
I think that I'm having the time of my life seeing some of these newer run clubs pop up. But you know, you guys and many others. Venice Run Club comes to mind. They're doing, gosh, I don't even know how many I think they had close to like 400, 500 people show up in a given night, and they need a police escort. The important thing here, this is not just runners. These are people who have never run a mile in their life.
100%.
This is bodybuilders, you know, quote unquote bodybuilders, or people maybe who just spend most of their time on hypertrophy lifts. These are people from all different walks of fitness and life who are just so desperately seeking the connection, the community. And these run clubs are making it, 1, accessible to your point, but 2, fun.
Yeah.
Like you just gave the perfect example of how you're gamifying and making this something enjoyable versus just, okay, we're going to go out every Tuesday night and run the West Side Highway and do the same out and back every single time. Whereas I feel like run clubs are evolving so quickly at that point where even that type of style is already, it's in the past. It's gone. You have
I think you got 3 sectors in it, right? You got your track clubs, which are really dialed in runners. Like I first thing that comes to mind is like Manhattan Track Club, Brooklyn Track Club, Whippets, all those like premier run clubs, I would say, track clubs. Then you've got run clubs who are more of kind of like the social, hey, we got a couple friends together and we're going to build this out, and it's going to kind of just be like out and back, and we run marathons, but it's kind of like whenever we feel like it, vary that middle ground.
And they have training cycles where, okay, this is the
100%.
New York City marathon crew, we're going to meet, et cetera. So they're kind of working towards these goals, but a little less serious than the first group.
And then I would say you have this kind of separate sector that we're nowhere near OSR, but I always shout them out. I think OSR
100%.
and Darcy from Take the Bridge, like those people paved the way for what we do. I think there's this other sector, though, of people who are community first. I'm going to give a quick guy a shout out named Darshan from Chilltown in Jersey City. I think what he's done so well over the last 5 years is his motto is, why can't we all get along? I know it sounds so cliche, but in this running community, it can sometimes get really either time heavy or like you ran here last week and now you're running there. Like that's the last thing we want. But that's why I think our demographic is different. Our demographic could be the bodybuilder, could be the person first time ever running. Our mile, midnight mile, quick little example, fastest time was at 4:49. And then we had people who were running over a 10-minute mile, and everyone stayed to support. And that person who ran the 4:49 runs in a track club in the city. He could have left, but he stayed and supported and cheered people on. And I think that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is something different. This isn't just like win your money and get out. It's people are coming together.
Yeah, it's non-elitist. And I think there's a time and a place for the elitists. That's
100%.
fine, because there is a demographic for that.
Yes.
And it's the no BS people who just want to get in, crush miles, get out, right? There's one particular that comes into mind. I see them out where I run almost every weekend, and they got the sunglasses on, the hats are real low, and they are charging forward, and they don't care if there's a stroller in their way. Yep. That's it, right? Yep. And then there's, the ones out there similar to what you guys are doing in More Than Miles, and like the pace is easy, the conversation is light, they're laughing, they're giggling, they're having fun. So I think it's a really cool time for running. I think it's exploding. I don't think running is as exclusive as it used to be. I think it's much more accessible. And I think you're seeing a very diverse group of people participating in run clubs across the country.
Yeah, I think you can note this too. I think the creative space in running has also exploded, where stories are getting told that weren't. And I think now you're finding another shout out. We run Uptown, like Hector, you're watching this, massive shout out. He's built community over like 10 years in the Heights. And like those stories are getting told, and those people are getting their flowers, which they very well deserve. Circa 92, those guys over there, like Miles Styles in the Bronx, Boogie Down Bronx, like those authentic run communities that weren't highlighted because they didn't have accessibility are now getting highlighted by these major brands. And it's refreshing because now you're seeing all different types of people at the forefront of these campaigns,
I agree. And, obviously Nike has been doing this since the 80s and 90s, probably earlier, but I'm going to recount what I remember as a kid too. I mean, sitting there watching YouTube videos, just getting goosebumps and chills because of how compelling their copywriting was and the commercials that they made. But now them, along with many others, both big and small, the brands are putting storytelling at the front of their strategy. I think Tracksmith does a really great job. Not only gorgeous imagery and photography and content altogether, but injecting those stories. If I think more locally, I think Bandit does a really great job at some of this too, right? So all of this to say, we're going to stop geeking out for a second on run clubs to say running's having a moment. It's not just for quote unquote runners. And I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to continue growing.
Yeah.
Who is your dream guest for More Than Miles? This is like the question, if you could choose a dinner party, dead or alive, who would you have? This is your version personalized for you. Yeah,
I got to go with Ned Brockman. We talked about him before the pod. I recently stumbled across him, and I'm shouting him out because he ran 1,000 miles. Raised $2.6 million for a charity. I think what I fall in love with more than anything with people through these More Than Miles docs that we do is their why. Like, why do you do this? Why do you take these feats of strength per se to do it? And there's nothing for them in the reward. It's not like they're winning first place. They're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. So Ned sticks out. I think I'll go back to I think Hector from We Run Uptown is another person. I'll give two really quick, but I think Hector does something with community that is undescribable. And I think what he's done for so long is he's just been a great listener for people. And from that, he's built so much trust. And I think those stories, and somebody like Heck, I would love to run with Heck. Heck, if you're watching this, I'd love to run with you and be able to share his story a little more.
Awesome. Stay tuned in the coming weeks. After this comes out, we will be releasing some More Than Miles episodes with our own BBCom coaches. Anthony will take them out in various places throughout New York City and help you all get to know them a little bit better. So stay tuned for more on that. Last question, Anthony, favorite place to run? It's a two-parter. Favorite place to run, location-wise, and then also favorite interview so far.
I would say my favorite place to run is the Palisades in New Jersey, underneath the GWB, because it's a lot of rolling hills. Favorite person I've interviewed, David Kilgore. He's the coolest guy in the world. And I would have had him as my dream guest, but I was lucky enough to have him already as his dream guest. 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days, all sub 3. And I truly mean this. He is one of the kindest individuals you will ever meet in your life.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, thanks so much for stopping by today. Tell the audience how they can follow along in the rest of your journey.
Yeah, you can just follow along at More Than Miles TC on Instagram or Anthony Crouchelli on Instagram.
Great. Thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode here at Bodybuilding.com. Stay tuned for more stories along the way.
Yeah.